Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. In English, we call it the Feast of the Sacrifice, but for the Muslims who celebrate it, it's Eid al-Adha. And for many Muslims, it involves Hajj, the act of making a pilgrimage to Mecca. This year, the holiday fell on August 10th and 11th. Here to discuss the act of pilgrimage is Faizan Syed, Executive Director of CAIR Missouri. That's the state chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Faizan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, what's the connection between this holiday and the idea of pilgrimage?
Hajj is the largest annual gathering of people on this earth. It is an opportunity for Muslims all across the world who speak every language and represent every ethnicity and background to give up their normal lives and to make their way to the city of Mecca, give up their clothing. Men, they basically stop wearing the clothing that they usually wear for two white garments. And when they get there, to engage in rituals in order to really seek, in our tradition, God forgiveness and God pleasure. The historical aspect of Hajj is that everything that people do on Hajj comes from the life of Abraham, may peace be upon him, in the sense that when people go to Hajj, the reason that a city of Mecca even exists is we believe that Abraham left his wife Hajar and their son Ishmael in the valley of Mecca many thousand years ago. And after he left them there, that's when Hajar, trying to find water for her baby, ran between two mountains called Safa and Marwa, which today millions of people do even to this day. And that's when they built the Kaaba, which is the area and the direction that Muslims all around the world pray towards. It is one of the most amazing pillars in our faith because in the Hajj, Muslims get to experience what it means to really live almost in God's kingdom, in the sense that when you get to Hajj, everybody is doing the same thing. They're all dressed in a very similar manner, and they're all there really to get closer to God Almighty.
And when you say everybody, how many people are we talking about in a given year?
So in a given year now, the Hajji numbers are about 3 million people will actually go there. So imagine the entire population of St. Louis and maybe even some, they're going during the Hajj season in order to pray, in order to do the rituals of Hajj, and in order to be in the city of Mecca.
And the Hajj season, that's not just this one weekend that is the holiest day.
Right. So the Hajj season happens on the last month of the Islamic calendar, appropriately named Dhul Hijjah, right? And it is in that month during the 8th and the 12th days is when the Hajj season itself begins. Of course, Muslims can go to the city of Mecca and do a lesser ritual, which is called Umrah, which is that you go and you do these rituals. But the actual Hajj season that ends with this holiday, that celebrates the life of Abraham, his sacrifice of being willing to sacrifice his son Ishmael, that happens on those days, and that's when the season of Hajj begins.
And so that's going to have all 3 million people there in this one place.
Yeah, if you can imagine, I want all of your listeners to kind of stop what they're doing and look around you. Every single person you see, whether they're on the highway, whether they're in the office, whether you're in school, imagine all of them participating in a ritual. And they're all from all around the world. And when it's time for the prayers that Muslims we pray 5 times throughout the day, imagine everybody, every stranger that's out on the street, they stop and form these concentric circles around the Kaaba. It's one of those sites that I can imagine being and living and being a part of. And it's something that's really very unique to our faith tradition.
And Faizan, you yourself have not been able to do this yet, I understand.
Not yet. So the Hajj is also very expensive, which these two folks will tell you in a little bit. And Hajj is required upon every Muslim who can, of course, financially and physically afford to do it. I'm still broke, so I haven't been able to go yet.
So you're exempt at this point.
Exempt until I start working with CAIR and get another job. Who knows?
And on that note, we are joined by 2 people who recently did their Hajj. Their names are Shahab Mushtaq and Faiza Mushtaq. They're both St. Louis residents and both completed their pilgrimage this year. Shahab and Faiza, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So what made you decide to go this year?
It was just the confluence of events that we were able to finally afford it. And I guess in a sense, God works in his own way because we were thinking about it for the longest time, and we're like, okay, how are we going to afford this? Because it costs several $1,000s per person.
And is that in terms of all the expenses together?
Yeah,
Or,
so
okay.
actually, so from the way it works, if you are going from North America, the government of Saudi Arabia requires you to go through a registered travel agency. And so the cost is that, we were going for a period of 2 weeks. And so you have to buy a all-inclusive package from through travel. So this covers everything while you're there, your hotel stay, your meals, your airfare, on-the-ground transportation. So why did we do it this year? So I used to work at Scottrade. And when Scottrade got bought out by TD Ameritrade, in one sense, I lost my job because of, as the buyout. But in another sense, it opened up, one door closed and another one opened, because with the severance package, that was what allowed us to be able to afford this. And
So that severance package opened the door.
yes,
to
yeah,
getting
exactly.
to have
It
your
opened
obligation.
the door. And in another sense, our kids were old enough sort of that, we could leave them and with relatives and go.
For a 2-week journey.
Yeah.
This provision that people coming from North America have to go through a registered travel agency, Faizan, what are they thinking with that? They don't want us just running around Saudi Arabia, lost, clueless, can't speak the language.
It's for a lot of reasons, and again, the Saudi government knows best, but especially North America, Europe, and these other countries, they do require you to go to a registered travel agency, and then also it's to make the journey for them easier. The thing is, once you get there, everything is kind of laid out for you. There's a whole package for it, and it's not like you're, in the wilderness trying to figure things out.
So, it's for your own well-being, because, as Faizan mentioned, there's like about 2 to 3 million people there. And if you can imagine that, there's limited hotel capacity and things. So they want to make sure that when you get there, you have a place to stay and you know how you're going to get from one place to another place. So it's for your own benefit that,
That makes sense. It sounds like an overwhelming situation if you didn't have a guide.
You are going there for a religious duty or pilgrimage, and they want to make sure that, when you get there, you're not dealing with a problem, oh, I don't have a hotel room, I don't have a place to stay, things like that.
Now, I know Saudi Arabia uses a lottery system, and around the world it can be very difficult to get in. Mushtaq, I understand that's not the case for Americans.
So the lottery system applies more to the Muslim majority countries with a much larger Muslim population. For example, Indonesia or Pakistan or Egypt, where they have millions of people who are eligible to go, but the government of Saudi Arabia allots a quota to each country. So with North America, U.S., Canada, Western Europe, we're pretty fortunate that the quota allotted, is large enough that anybody who wants to go, we don't use up our entire quota. So whoever wants to go and has the financial means can pretty much go.
So, Faiza, tell us about this flight over. I imagine it was a series of flights from St. Louis to Mecca.
Definitely. We had to drive to Chicago and then take a flight there to Abu Dhabi for Etihad Airways. And then we had a layover and then another 2-3 hour flight to Mecca. So we went to Mecca first. Yeah.
So that's a long journey. And yet in the final legs of it, you must have had all these travelers going to the same place for the same purpose. Did this just feel like the world's most exciting class trip, maybe?
It was nerve-wracking. We were so nervous. I don't know what's going to happen. But once you get there, it's so peaceful and just calms you down. You're here. So.
And what were you so nervous about?
I mean, like traveling basically and going to each and every, doing all these steps correctly, because it's going to be our first and probably our last Hajj. I hope not, but we'll see. So, we're excited for that. Yeah.
Shahab, were you nervous too?
Yes, I mean, you have the anticipation that, you're going there for God's pleasure. And at the same time, you want to do your best in fulfilling all of the duties. And for in Islam, that we have the concept that you try to do whatever you can to the best of your ability. and then it's God accepts your worship. So that was the whole point, that we do what we can without overstepping on anybody else's rights, and that we hope that God accepts our worship.
I have my mother also traveling with me. She is old and she was on wheelchair, so that was another.
That adds a complication.
Yes, that was
Even
it was
just going to Chicago with someone in a wheelchair.
Definitely, it was just us. Then we could have just walk around for miles and we'd be okay. But we have her on a wheelchair. That was another.
And then in this international city with 3 million people suddenly flocking to it, was it wheelchair accessible for what you were trying to do?
That was another deal. Even though they try the hardest to keep the wheelchair, but we were so privileged living in America. Like everything is wheelchair accessible, and over there we forget. And then I was like, why is it like so? But then,
some complications.
Yes, definitely. Like I had to go through certain things, and riding her, like, it's not easy. Definitely, yeah.
One of you mentioned something about how there's even different clothes for this. Of course, I have to go to my fellow woman on this question. Faiza, what do people wear on their Hajj?
I'm not going to tell what the men wear, but I can definitely mention women wear just a head covering, and it has to cover the whole, you have to wear a loose-fitting clothes. It's hot, so you have to wear something loose as well, not too tight, or it's more cotton. So I was okay. I don't have any problem with it. I mean,
for men, Shahab, what?
So for men, there's requirement that when you're going, it's called ihram, and basically the requirement is that you're wearing 2 pieces of cloth that are people say unstitched, but what mean they're not fitted, so you can't wear like pants or shirts. So it's basically like almost like 2 towels. You can large towels. One you wrap around your waist and one for your chest. And the point of that is that everybody,
This is
regardless
St. Louis on the
of
air
who
on
you
St. Louis
are,
Public Radio,
how rich
90.7 KWMU.
everybody's equal in the eyes of God.
So you can't get too fancy with those restrictions.
No, everybody just all males are wearing the same 2 pieces of white cloth. You're not allowed to use perfume, and there's, some restrictions on what type of, you can't wear any headwear, no hats or anything like that. So the point is that, everybody is there for the purpose of worshiping God, and everybody is equal. That it doesn't matter whether you're a king or a multimillionaire or you're a lowly peasant or a farmer, whatever, in the eyes of God, you're all equal. And during this time, you are there solely to focus on your worship. So you're not to be distracted by the material concerns, like, oh, what am I wearing? And are my clothes good enough, or things like that.
We're talking to Shahab Mushtaq along with his wife, Faiza. They went to Saudi Arabia for their Hajj, which is a pilgrimage. We're also here with Faizan Syed, who's the executive director of CAIR Missouri. Faizan, to go away from sort of the quotidian details to the bigger picture here, what are the main rituals that get performed during this pilgrimage?
So when you first go to Mecca, there's a few rituals that basically everybody follows. The main rituals are, first of all, the clothing, as described, putting on the ihram. Then when you go to the Kaaba and you see the building, there's also a ritual where you basically circumnavigate. You walk around the Kaaba 7 times. As people do that, many people will try to touch the Kaaba with their hands, though it's not part of our religion or required, but many people want to do that. And at the corner of the Kaaba on the east side, there's this black stone that's basically in a silver ring that's there, which in our faith tradition, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, kissed that stone, and many people also today to try to kiss that stone and be in that stone as well. Beyond that, there's also a ritual where Muslims will run between these 2 mountains called Safa and Marwa. Believe it or not, 1,400 years ago, those mountains were 3 times the size that they are today. But because so many people walk there and the dirt that gets on their shoes, they've now decreased in size. So now the Saudi government doesn't let people go on those mountains really anymore. So there's
And are they actual mountains or more like hills?
They used to be mountains.
Okay, now they're hills.
Yeah. So what happens is that just as Hajar, when her when she was left in the desert with her baby, she ran in between these two mountains, keeping an eye on Ishmael to try to find help and find somebody to help her. So to today, millions of people make that same journey as well. When Abraham came to sacrifice his son, during what we celebrate now as Eid al-Adha, we believe that the devil, the shaitan, he also came and tried to tempt him away from doing that, saying, this is kind of crazy, what are you doing? So then Abraham and his son basically took out rocks and they pelted the devil. And today, you have these three areas that are really giant, almost like imagine three highways on top of each other with these giant pillars in between, where millions of people also throw the rocks in order to relive that ritual. The final day of Hajj, and I'll let them just say in the end, but the last ritual is, the last day is you go to this mountain called Mountain of Arafat, which is where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave the final sermon. And that is considered the most holy day in our tradition, where people, they make prayer. And this year it rained on that day, which is something
that a
that's
good
very,
thing or a bad thing? And
well, it's 108 degrees outside, so
so at least
Excellent
pleasant.
thing, yes.
Okay.
It's not just that the rain cooled things down. It was just blessings from God. Like for me, it was the highlight of my trip. I was just standing for praying, and I love rain. It just and then I was feeling like this is for me. He just like he wanted me to just have this rain and just have this blessing on me, and this pouring rain. It was so beautiful. I can't even explain.
Was this a torrential rain or more of a light rain?
It was it was like
God
and it was
doused
just
you.
Like yes, for like it was for 1 or 2 hours, and then it rained almost every day. I have pictures of the rainbow, and like it was so beautiful.
That sounds like a wonderful moment. Shahab, when Faizan was talking about pelting the devil, what was that like to do that ritual?
So that again, it's people. It's very symbolic that you're trying. You have to keep in mind that okay, why are we doing this? And you're doing it because you're reenacting what Prophet Abraham did, and it's a symbolic that okay, that you are trying to negate all the temptations in your life, that anything that turns you away from God. And, some people get pretty emotional, at this point that, you're only supposed to take small pebbles like the size of like a chickpea and, throw it against this wall as a symbolic, of negating the temptations of the devil or whatever. But people, they get really wrapped up in this, and they'll take like bigger rocks. A lot of people just like take off their shoes or their slippers, and they're like, take that, But like what you were asking about, what. So one of the challenging things about Hajj is that you have this large number of people. You have like 2 or 3 million, and the actual part of Hajj, you have to go to like 3 different locations outside of Mecca. And they're called, Mina, Arafat, and Muzdalifah. They're outside of, they're like plains outside of Mecca. And so all of these people, imagine like 2 to 3 million people, they all have to go to these locations within a certain fixed period of time. So
Are these locations you can walk to, or you need to take a shuttle?
So a lot of people before modern transportation did walk, and today too certain people walk. A lot of people take buses, and the Saudi government in the past few years, they've actually built a light rail system that goes between all 3 of these areas, so that helps alleviate the traffic. But majority of people take buses, and it gets very crowded. And
we took the train.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've got so many people in this relatively small space, and they're trying to get here and get there, and yet you've got people who speak many, many different languages. Was there a language barrier as you're trying to communicate with your fellow pilgrims?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the majority of like the employees of the Saudi government, the security guards and the people showing you the way, they just speak Arabic, and then you have fellow pilgrims from all over the world. And so sometimes it was a challenge.
They have a lot of signs now with different languages if they want certain things to be said. But if like you have to get up from one place and they have to like say, get up from here, they just show you how to do it. That's all.
So you're kind of able to follow their
Yeah,
lead more than
that's
have to
all.
talk.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
For the most part, is everybody involved in this getting along and nice to each other? It's got to be
Oh my
hard with
God.
so
yes,
many people.
definitely. You just go there and you've been fed from like all these people who are just standing there. They want to give you dates. They want to feed you water. They want to give you coffee. They want to give. So you're just sitting and praying, and there are people walking around with all these. There's so much food. They want to just feed everybody.
And these are
There's
people
like
who live in that country, just
no,
taking care of the
just coming
pilgrims?
from all over the place.
People
and-
feeding each other.
Yeah, so
It's
so
both. I mean, you have the pilgrims helping each other out, and then the people who live in Saudi Arabia who were able to make it, they have this amazing sense of hospitality and generosity that, they want to help out the pilgrims, and they want to do their part to welcome them and make it easier for them.
Faizan, for people who are celebrating Eid al-Adha back at home, are any of these rituals things that people do back in Missouri, or these are pretty much limited to Mecca?
Well, that's a really great question. So the one ritual that Muslims all around the world can participate in is the sacrifice that happens on the very last day. So on the last day of Hajj, basically many of the men might shave their heads totally, or they might cut off a piece of their hair, and then they do a sacrifice where they'll actually get an animal like a goat, cow, camel, and then they'll sacrifice that, and then they distribute the meat to the poor and the needy in that area.
And what's the religious meaning behind that sacrifice?
It really goes back to Abraham. So when Abraham was going to sacrifice his son Ishmael, we believe that the angel came and basically replaced his son with a ram at that time. So the way to engage in that same act of sacrifice, Muslims all across the world, they also do that same ritual. So in St. Louis, for example, it's called Qurban or Udhiyah. And even in St. Louis, we actually did the same thing. So a lot of people after the Eid prayer, which is the early morning prayer, they'll go to a farm or they'll go and actually actually engage in the sacrifice as well. And then they distribute the meat all over.
Shahab, for you, it looks like you did shave your head during this trip.
Yes, I did.
Is that sort of your biggest takeaway from that? Is I'm back here, I'm carrying this with me, that I now have this shaved head? Or what did you bring home with you?
No, the biggest takeaway is so when you perform Hajj, once you complete it, the reward for Hajj, God has promised that the reward for an accepted Hajj is that all of your sins are forgiven, and it's like you've just been given birth. You're a newborn baby. You've just come into this world, and you have no sins.
You get to start over.
So yeah, so it's like a second lease on life. It's a second chance that, okay, God has forgiven me all my sins, and He says, you'll be granted a place in heaven. And so, for me, especially now, the personal takeaway for me is that I have to make a more concerted effort to be a better person, to try to adhere to the dictates of the religion in a more focused manner, and not repeat the same mistakes that earlier in life. Whenever you've been given a second chance, right? Like somebody who was extremely ill because of a bad diet or some habit, like maybe they used to smoke or something, and now they had to go have some big surgery or something, and after that, given a second chance of life, they don't go back to those same, right? So the same thing with me is that I just went through this incredible experience, and God has promised that He's forgiven my sins, so I should be grateful for that, and I should do my best not to repeat those same mistakes.
Faiza, what about for you?
It was, for me, I'm thinking like one of my teachers told me that it's like exiting the world. When we went there, it's like you exit the world and you are in another world. And when you were coming back, it was like in a tunnel, and you're coming back to this world again, full of so many things. And I have my kids, and I'm not feeling well or something. There's always something. But after Hajj, I think you become mindful. It's like another thing called taqwa, like knowing that God, consciousness of God, that He's there and He's watching you and He's there for you. And you keep thinking of God being there in your life. Like before that, maybe you just worry so much about the world. Now I'm just thinking that I left everything to God, and now everything God has to take care of me. So, I mean, that made me feel so good, you know.
And we actually just have time for one more question today, and it's kind of a big one. Faizan Syed, you've been a friend of the show. I know you've been on many times over the years. You're leaving St. Louis. Tell us where you're headed.
So I've been the executive director of CAIR Missouri now for 8 years, and now I've just gotten a job to be the director at Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I'm very excited for the move. I'm going to miss a lot of people here. Some people in the community are still as shocked, so they keep talking to me like, you should stay. Like, I already accepted the job, so it's very hard.
Can't change your mind now.
Yeah, can't change the mind now. But I'm excited because Dallas and Texas is the second largest state in the country. It's rapidly demographically changing. There's a large Muslim population there. And I'm hoping to go to that area to really empower the Muslim community there to not only impact the state of Texas, but through that possibly impact the greater country and greater society as well. So I'm really looking forward to that trip. I'm looking forward to this new opportunity, and I'll be back and forth. So nobody can get rid of me that easily, but I'm very excited for the trip.
Faizan Syed, thank you for joining us one last time.
Thank you again.
And Shahab Mushtaq and
you.
Faiza Mushtaq, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.